Hey everyone, welcome back to the Smorgasbord with John Knopick. I am, of course, your host, John Knopick, and today we're going to be diving into something a little heavier. Don't worry, we'll still find something to laugh about along the way. You know, life has this funny way of serving up these massive curveballs when you least expect them. Now, one minute you're cruising along, thinking you've got, everything figured out, because we always do, and then the next, bam! You're absolutely 100% flat on your back, wondering what in the hell has just happened. That's trauma for you, folks. It doesn't knock politely, it kicks down the door and makes itself at home. As a person who's been through it a lot in his life and seen it with people around me as well, I can testify to that and agree completely that it is more than accurate of a description on how to categorize trauma. But here's the thing about trauma that nobody tells you. Sometimes the most resilient people, yeah, they're the ones who can still find something to laugh about even when everything is falling apart. And that's what we're going to explore today on this episode of the Smorgasbord. Trauma, resilience, and finding your laugh when life gets messy. As I said on the first episode a few back, this was going to be something that I was going to be hitting pretty hard because it speaks to me greatly with everything that I've dealt with throughout my years. Um, it's a topic that needs to be discussed. And as I said, on this show, we're going to be diving into a bunch of other things, conspiracy theories, more wrestling stuff, more current events stuff, politics, things like that. But for today's episode, we are going to be diving into the wonderful, beautiful, amazing world of drama. So let's grab a plate, shall we? Let's pull up a chair and let's dig into today's special episode, a heaping helping of real talk about bouncing back when life knocks you down, with a side of inappropriate humor because, let's face it, sometimes it's the only way to get through the day. And if you know me and you've known me long enough, you would know that that is 100% the case. Um, when things are hitting a rough patch or there's a serious moment or something like that, I always try to lighten the mood as best I can because it's easier to try to navigate through thick, horrific brush like that if you've got a humorous light to help guide your way. So that's what I try to do as best I can. And as always, guys, as I say every time, I want to hear from you guys. Hit me up on all social media platforms at SmorgasbordJK or shoot me an email at john@knopick, Knopick, ventures.com. Share your stories with me of your times of resilience, times that you've had to dig down deep and battle things that you really wish you didn't have to battle or, overcome unexpected life altering gut punches. I want to know all about it. I want to hear your stories. I want to get that feedback from you guys. I want to help you try to navigate if you're still struggling with it. Also share with me, like I said, your darkest moments that somehow became funny in retrospect. Let me know how you progressed, how you navigated through with humor, if you did, or if you had someone there that was helping you get through it with their sense of humor and whatnot. Or just shoot me an email, say hi, say, hey, loving what you're putting up so far. Can't wait for the next episode. Give me some topics you'd like me to discuss on future episodes, and I'd be more than happy to throw those up for you guys as well. Because as I said before, this show is absolutely 100% as much your show as it is mine. But for now, we're going to take a little break. We'll be back here in just a moment and start our first segment of the Smorgasbord. What is trauma? We'll be right back here on the Smorgasbord with John Knopick. Stick around. You're listening to the Smorgasbord with John Knopick. Thanks for bringing up a plate and serving yourself a heaping helping. You can catch me on all social medias at SmorgasbordJK or by email john@canoppicventures.com. Grab your fork and knife. It's time to dive back in. All right, guys, welcome back to the Smorgasbord. I am John Knopick. Thank you so much for grabbing a plate and digging in with me today. All right, let's start about talking about what trauma actually is, because there is unfortunately nowadays a lot of misconceptions out there in regards to trauma. When most people hear the word trauma, they think of those massive, as I said, life-altering events, natural disasters, combat, serious accidents, and absolutely by far and away, those things are definitely traumatic and fit the bill. But trauma does come in all shapes and sizes. It's not just black and white or anything like that. Sometimes it's the sudden loss of someone you love, like when my mom passed away less than 12 hours before she was supposed to meet my son and hold him for the very first time. Man, that still gets me. It just, it's been 5 years now and just, it still hasn't gotten easier and I don't think it ever will. Or, it could be growing up with a parent who never quite knew how to show love, like my dad, who, bless his heart, just never knew how to raise a son due to no fault of his own. That was just his upbringing, or lack thereof, and he didn't know how to break the cycle. So unfortunately, I became the brunt of that negligence and neglect. Um, but yeah, I mean, trauma can also be those smaller, repeated experiences that chip away at you over time. You've got this big suit of armor, and over time, blink, 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 and it just starts chipping away at it. Like your boss who constantly undermines you. The friend that always makes you feel like you're not enough, or your friend that says that they're your friend, but when they get into another group, when they're around another group of their colleagues or buddies, you become persona non grata or you don't exist. Things like that. Those are different types of, and the even like some trauma such as like financial stress that keeps you up at night, month after month, year after year, decade after decade, for those of us who've been stuck with financial issues for a very, very, very long time. Now, I remember this one time back when I was working at WVTM down in Birmingham, Alabama. The one where they had a target on my back from day one, if you tuned into a previous episode. I was sitting in this meeting, and as I said, I just come back from a business trip to another station over in North Carolina to learn about how they ran their tech side of things to try to implement them in our station. And then that's when my boss decided to call me out in front of the station manager as well as the HR woman about my expense report and the fact that for some reason they weren't happy about the fact that I didn't itemize my receipts, which you know, that's going to happen. We're not all meticulous. Stuff happens. And came right out bluntly as all get out and just said, "Why did you spend so much at Chick-fil-A?" Like literally my jaw hit the floor. And he was asking it in such a way that it felt like I'd committed some cardinal sin by eating too many chicken sandwiches or buying too many chicken nuggets or goodness gracious, that waffle fry container was just way too large. I mean, yeah, needless to say, it was a massive taking aback moment where I was just like, are we really doing this? Are you serious right now? And in that moment, I just felt this weird mix of humiliation mixed with rage, mixed with if you're going to come at me like that, you're going to get what you get from me in return because I'm not just going to sit idly by and let you dress me down in front of not only my boss of the entire station but HR as well. I also did though. The weirdest part was I also had this bubble of laughter because of the level of absurdity in that accusation, in that statement that came out of his mouth. Here I am sitting there, a grown man, 40 years old, being interrogated about my lunch choices in front of, colleagues and superiors. To me, that is an example of a small trauma, but to this day, it still sticks in my craw because it continued to fester and caused, me to be eventually lose my position there. In hindsight, I don't even know if it would have been something I would have wanted to stick with just because of the fact that I never really gelled with them from square one because of the fact that they wanted their station to be run a certain way, and I was tasked by first management, not the station management, but the first management to get him to sh- to shape up and fly right. So excuse me. Yeah, it definitely stuck in my craw for a while. But again, in hindsight, I ended up with a much, 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 much better career path that I'm on now. So, you know, blessing in disguise, I guess. Thing about trauma is that it's not just what happens to you. Not at all. It's about how your brain and your body process what happens. Because it will take an emotional toll, it'll take a physical toll, it'll take a mental toll, and it all just depends on how your body and your mind reacts to those traumatic events. And there's been more than one case and examples where people can walk away from a car crash, be completely fine, while others develop anxiety and PTSD just from a near miss in traffic. It's one of the beauties of being human beings is that we're all the same in certain aspects, but we're all completely different in other aspects. So it's a nice little mix, if you were. Um, I mean, there is no trauma competition, folks, or anything like that. It's like my trauma is worse than yours. I'm the gold medal winner. And there's no competition here. Your experience is 100% valid, whether it's big trauma or little trauma. All of it is under the trauma umbrella, so it's all valid regardless of the size or regardless of what happened. The other thing about trauma that nobody tends to tell you is how it lives inside your body. It's not just memories, guys. It's physical. Believe me. As a person who struggled with binge eating after traumatic events and watching his weight balloon to health um health related concern levels, I can absolutely tell you that trauma does take a physical toll. Um, some people hit the alcohol. Some people hit hard level drugs. Some people, like me, uh, stress eat and eat because, you trying to push your feelings down by shoving a bunch of food down your gullet. Um, it's your as I said, your heart races when you go through a traumatic event, your palms sweat, your stomach tying itself into 75 million different knots. I've got this thing. Um, I don't really share this, but I've got this thing where whenever I hear a certain ringtone, like the one my phone was using when I got the call, or I should say, the one that my phone was using when I got the call about my uncle when he passed unexpectedly, because rather than my sisters at the time when this was like 2010, 2012, whatever it was, um, rather than them like with my wife's family, if someone has a medical issue or someone passes away, they reach out on all social media platforms, Messenger. They're like, call family, get a hold of family, and everybody's frantically calling each other to making sure that they're being told in real time what had just happened. Back when it happened with my uncle, I got left a voicemail. My sisters did not wait and to try to get a hold of me live to break the news to me. They left me a voicemail. So that was fun. So yeah, as I said, whenever I heard this particular ringtone, the one my phone was using when I got the voicemail alert about my uncle, my whole body just froze at the time. It also it triggered like when we were in Denver, and whenever I heard the song "Every Teardrop Is a Waterfall" by Coldplay at the time, it was right after he passed, and I heard it. It made me bawl just laying in bed in the hotel room, just bawling my eyes out. And for a while there, every time I heard that song, instant trigger. Luckily now, as time has gone on, I've been able to grow past that, and now it doesn't affect me as much, but it definitely did back then, to say the least. You know, it, it's been, as I said, it's been 5 years, and there are still triggers. Like there's another song. Songs tend to trigger me, especially if they're tied to traumatic or upsetting moments. There was a song called "Fix You," also by Coldplay, ironically. Um, and every time I heard it, I thought of my mom and instant tears. Just in that, it wasn't even going through the entire song. It was just the moment he started singing the lyrics, I knew what the song was, and just everything bubbled up, and I just lost it. Um, and I've struggled mightily, but I've been able for the most part to be able to listen to that and be strong enough to make it through. But there was still times where back then I couldn't hear it. I couldn't hear that song or even the beginning bars of it without feeling like I was right back in that moment, um, standing or sitting on my sister's couch in Johnston with her coming waking me up at 4 in the morning to let me know mom was gone. Um, yeah, it was just those are nightmares for me at times. But here's the funny part. And yes, believe it or not, there actually is a funny part to this. A few months ago, um, I was standing in line at Target, and somebody's phone actually goes off with Coldplay's "Fix You," the chorus of it. Um, I immediately started having a little bit of a battle internally with my emotions. And my son, who's now 5 and has zero filter, bless his heart, looks at me and goes, "Dada, why are you making your poop face?" As I said, no filter. Love my little guy. Loud enough for the entire checkout area to hear. Yeah. Huh. Just like that, this moment would normally send me spiraling because something I'm laughing about with a bunch of strangers, and just like that, I should say, the that moment that would normally send me spiraling and like make me upset, he would say something that loud in front of everybody, became something that, I was just ended up laughing about with him and a bunch of strangers in the middle of Target. And again, guys, that's the weird thing about trauma. Sometimes the only appropriate response is inappropriate laughter. But now we've dug in a little bit on the trauma side. Now let's get into the resilience side, shall we? Next segment, Smorgasbord with John Knopick coming up here right after this quick ad break. Stick around. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll be back with that next segment here in just one moment. Stick around. You're listening to the Smorgasbord with John Knopick. Thanks for bringing up a plate and serving yourself a heaping helping. You can catch me on all social medias at smorgasbordjk or by email john@canopicventures.com. Grab your fork and knife. It's time to dive back in. All right, guys, welcome back to the Smorgasbord with John Knopick. Thank you guys so much for grabbing a heaping helping of what we're serving out to you guys this week. Now, let's talk about resilience, shall we? Which is basically your brain's way of saying, nice try, trauma, but I'm not going down that easy. Now, resilience is not something that you're born with or without. It is a skill that you build over time, like a muscle. And just like muscles, it's going to grow stronger when it's tested. Now, that doesn't mean that you should go looking for traumatic experiences to build character. Trust me, life will throw you plenty of opportunities without you having to seek them out yourself. There's actually some fascinating science behind resilience. Researchers have found that resilient people, they tend to share certain traits. They maintain strong social connections. They find meaning in their struggles. They're flexible in their thinking, and this is the big one, they don't take themselves too seriously. Back to humor, guys. This last one is very crucial, folks. Being able to laugh at yourself, especially in your darkest moments, is like having a superpower. It's like being one of the X-Men or, being part of the Marvel universe. It doesn't make the pain go away necessarily, but it does give you that momentary escape, a chance to catch your breath, as it were, before diving right back into it. Now, little story for you guys. I remember when we were moving from Alabama up to Jackson, Tennessee, little Memphis, little Gunshot Alley, as I so affectionately call it. We were driving this massive U-Haul down these narrow country roads, and I missed my turn. It happens. You don't have a lot of good cell phone service in that area, and the navigation's flaking in and out, and you think you're going the right way, and the next thing you know, you missed the turn because the navigation hadn't caught up because the fact the reception dipped out for a second. So I try to turn this behemoth, um, 26 footer, um, around on this tiny road, and guess what happens? We get stuck in a ditch. Of course we do. It's the only way to go. Now, at this point, we're absolutely exhausted. It's been a long day. We're almost to our destination. Finally, it started, rain's on the way as well. I mean, there's just a smorgasbord of things all coming together at the same time. Our little dude, he's not happy right now in his car seat. We're in the middle of nowhere again, as I said, spotty cell phone service. I'm the one driving the big truck because my wife and son were driving our vehicle. Because unfortunately, for some reason, U-Haul and other moving companies felt it in their infinite wisdom to not make the cabs big enough to facilitate car seats. Boggles my mind why that is, but that's rather nor here or there. Now everything coming together like that, especially with the truck in the ditch, that could have been the breaking point, right? The moment where we just absolutely lost it, everything went to crap at that point, and just there was no point of no return. But instead, my wife, because we're talking on the phone, as best we can, because we have the vehicles behind each other, she uh, she starts laughing into the phone, and she's like, "Well, I guess we live here now. We're ditch people." And we both just bust a gut laughing. So much so that my little dude in the back, he hears it and he starts doing his little hysterical laughter as well. Like, not just a chuckle, like tears streaming down your face, can't catch breath. Sorry, kind of laughing. And our son in our back, in the back, is just eating it up with a spoon. And it makes it seem like we've lost our minds. He makes it a reaction like you guys are just absolutely insane. That makes us laugh even harder. And then out of nowhere, thankfully, Tennessee love, these people from a nearby house show up with their pickup truck and a winch, and they pull us out. And they could have been like, hell yeah, now you got to give us money or da 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 da. Da. They asked for nothing. It was just neighbors helping neighbors, even though we weren't technically living next to them. And they even sent us on our way with directions, and the guy's wife actually even came out and gave my son a few of her homemade cookies. That's Tennessee. That's Tennessee love right there. And that's why I said, this has been the best place I think that we've ever lived. Um, I still am partial to California, but but here's the thing, about what we dealt with there. Had we not have found that moment of laughter, if we let that stress, consume us, we might have actually missed that help that was literally right around the corner. That's called resilience. Excuse me, that's called resilience in action. Now, another key aspect of resilience is what psychologists, because, I was trying to get into psychology before I went the tech route, call post-traumatic growth. It's this idea that after experiencing trauma, some people just don't recover. They actually grow in ways that they wouldn't have otherwise. They develop deeper relationships, discover new strengths, gain wisdom, or sometimes they even find completely new meaning in life. I've actually seen this in action in my own life. After my mom passed, I went through this period of massive, crippling, intense grief. Um, but on the other side of that grief, I found this new appreciation for the small moments with my son and with my wife, and I cherish those moments like you would not believe every single day, even though we all get stressed out to no end. We all have our moments. You know, we all have those issues that we battle. It's just those moments when you can just sit back, watch him grow, and you're just in awe and like, I made this. I made that incredible little human right there, and he's thriving because of the way him and my wife are raising him. Um, and in that moment as well, I became, as I said, even more present. Where I was just at the first part right after she passed, I was very closed off. People could hardly talk to me. I didn't respond much. Again, I shoved all this food down my gullet and my weight ballooned to levels I never want to see ever again. Um, but after a while, I became more present in the moment, more grateful for every single moment that we have had and still have together. That doesn't mean, in any certain sense of the word, it does not mean that I'm glad my mom is gone. I would give anything, almost anything, to have her back, to be able to have her, watch him grow up and just be in awe of him the way we all are. But, it does mean that even in that devastating loss, there was growth. Um, Sometimes that growth absolutely comes in unexpected forms, like developing a really dark sense of humor. Something I'm not proud of, huh, but something I kind of felt as needed as a coping mechanism and something that grew, and was cultivated in the bubble that was the traumatic situation. Now, my wife and I, to this day, we still have these inside jokes about death and loss that would absolutely probably horrify most people. Not going to share them with you guys because I don't want to lose what viewers I'm starting to try to amass here. Thank you for tuning in. But for us, it's a way of processing, a way of taking back some control that at the time to us felt very, very much out of our control. And to me, that's the paradox of resilience. It doesn't mean that you don't feel the pain. It doesn't mean that the pain is invisible, that it's gone, that it doesn't exist anymore. Couldn't be further from the truth. It just means that, you find ways to carry it with you while still moving forward. And, sometimes that just means laughing when you feel like crying. So now we've dug into trauma and we've dug into resilience. So for the next part of the smorgasbord, we're going to be headlong or diving head first into personal stories of bouncing back and examples of bouncing back from traumatic experiences and situations. That's the next segment coming up here on the Smorgasbord with John Knopick. We'll be back after this quick ad break. Stick around, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be right back. You're listening to the Smorgasbord with John Knopick. Thanks for bringing up a plate and serving yourself a heaping helping. You can catch me on all social medias at smorgasbordjk or by email john@canopicventures.com. Grab your fork and knife. It's time to dive back in. All right, guys, welcome back to the Smorgasbord. I am John Knopick. Thank you so, so much for tuning in. Now, for you guys here, I want to pull back the curtain a little bit for you and share some personal stories about bouncing back from trauma. And again, as I said previously, and all the time, I want to know your stories as well. So shoot me a message on all social media, smorgasbordjk, at smorgasbordjk, or email john@canopicventures.com. Because, I think there is absolute power in hearing about how other people have navigated their darkest times. I think it's actually therapeutic to hear the stories and know that, hey, I'm not alone. Other people have gone through what I've gone through. So to me, that's a very big thing. Um, Now I've talked about before, again, as I mentioned, about losing my mom right before she was supposed to meet my son. And again, that was to my personal experience as of this day, gut punch like no other. here we were driving back to Iowa, thinking about we were going to be starting this brand new chapter, and that we were going to be, trying to mend the fences from a family standpoint and get everything back on track there. With my mom getting to be a grandma to her little guy, um, and watching him grow up and thrive and everything like that. And then just like that, he's gone. Just like that. The first few weeks after her passing to this day are still kind of a blur to me. I mean, we tried to take photos and videos every day of our little dude growing up. So I do have, photos and videos, clips of those days after she passed, but they're still a blur in my mind. Like I see the fragments there, but they don't paint the picture for me. Like it's still the trauma there has still made it not a clear picture. I remember holding him, my little dude, and just sobbing, thinking about all the moments my mother would never get to experience with him. Um, and it hurt. Man, massively hurt. Still does. I remember feeling this intense anger at the universe. Still have that to an extent. At God, at whatever higher power you may believe in. In my upbringing, because my family was Catholic and whatnot, it was God, Jesus, things like that. Because what kind of a cruel joke is that? To take someone away hours before a moment they've been waiting their entire lives for. What entity out there that preaches all, I love all and I take care of all and I have everyone's best interest and da 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 and trust me and believe in me and da da da. But i- who would do that? Why would they do that if they preach all this love and support? Why would they do such a cruel thing like that? But here's where resilience kicked in. Even though I didn't at the time, did not recognize it, but that's what it was. My Aunt Irene, Reenie, as we called her affectionately, rest in peace. Love you, Reenie. I still got the duck that you gave my son on our nightstand, and every time I hear it, I think of him. Um, this is where she stepped up and became the grandmother figure that my son needed. My wife's family, another big part of my growth and getting through the traumatic times then. The Sopranos, again, as I said, I lovingly call them, rallied around us with food, way too much food, support, love, because they gone through their own grief, so we got to drive down there. And the funny part was, my son was born January 3rd, and the funniest part was that both my wife's my wife has two younger sisters, and my wife's older of the two younger sisters just happened to be pregnant at the exact same time that she was. And then her cousin was also pregnant at the same time that she was. So we've got three of them. My wife's cousin had her little boy at the end of December 2019. We had Logan, our little dude, January 3rd, 2020, and her oldest younger sister had her daughter, um, February 2nd, 2020. So yeah, we were all like 6 weeks apart. So the day after my mom passed, we went up to my parents' house, and I still wanted my dad to meet him. I still wanted my dad to hold my son, his last grandson, for the very first time. He wouldn't do it. He refused, straight up refused. And his excuse was that my son, reminded my dad too much of my mom. And granted, I understand it was just 24 hours since he lost her. But I'll tell you a story later on down the road about just how much she meant to him, with what he did shortly after she passed. But yeah, so we ended up leaving there unfulfilled and drove down 45 minutes to my wife's family's compound, as they call it, the Sopranos compound in Kyoto. and all three of the babies got to be together and got to be held by their respective grandparents. My son and my niece got to be held by my wife's mom, his grandma, and my cousin, my wife's cousin's kid got to be held by her grandma, his grandma, I should say. Um, and slowly, day by day, we started to find our new normal up there. Unfortunately, again, as I said, it involved a lot of eating, stress eating, depression eating, made things really bad from a health standpoint. We even though that was going on, we still started to create new traditions, new memories. We tried to make the best of a bad situation, as it were. We found ways to keep my mom's memory alive for our son, telling him stories about her, showing him pictures. We even had some like old school video footage. Um, Plus, right after she passed, and he was still, just barely even a couple months old, and he kept like whenever my wife or I was holding him, he kept looking over our shoulder, and people were like, "Yeah, that's your mom. Your mom's there. You can't see her, but she's there, watching and just enjoying from wherever she may be." Um, I remember, many a time just saying, "Don't leave us. Stay as long as you want, because he's enjoying it, and we need you." Um, and then there was this one day, about 6 months after my mom passed, when my son did something that reminded me so much of my mom. He did this little head tilt and smile, and the smile that he gave me, pure, pure, my mom, like spot on. And I started laughing and crying at the same time because it was this weird emotional cocktail that probably made me look like a lunatic, and I was well into that, looking that way after what I'd been through. But in that moment, I felt again like she was still with us in some way, as weird as it sounded. And that's the thing about resilience. It doesn't mean you get over the trauma. It means you learn to integrate it into your life, in a way that allows you to continue to progress and move forward and heal. Now, another story that I want to share with you guys is about my career roller coaster, the one that I've mentioned on previous episodes. Again, as I said before, I've been laid off more times than I care to count. Game Show Network, Fox Sports, Alabama, each time felt like the rug was being pulled out from underneath me. And the Alabama situation in particular was very rough because it felt deeply personal. Again, if you go back to that Chick-fil-A story, you now understand why that felt that way to me. They were looking for any reason to get rid of me, and they found it in an expense report of all things. Now, when I got that call on a Sunday night, standing in a Publix parking lot, 'cause we just went grocery shopping for the following week, telling me not to come back, I was devastated. My wife was frantic, didn't know what was going to happen, how we were going to survive, how we were going to feed ourselves, what path we were going to go down. We didn't know what was going to happen next. I moved my family a long way from Iowa to Alabama for this opportunity, and now, just like Iowa, in the blink of an eye, it was gone. And I remember sitting on our front porch that night, just staring into space, wondering what the hell I was gonna do. Because obviously my wife and son were counting on me. They still do, thankfully. I'm glad I still have a need. I'm still needed. My wife was inside putting our son to bed. I was getting ready to come in to read stories with her and him. And I didn't want her to see me fall apart. She told me that I can be vulnerable with her, and even, 20 plus years in, or almost 20 years in at the time, I still was very skittish about doing that. Because how was I going to be the one to tell her to her face that I'd failed again, that I failed them, that I let them down due to no fault of my own, but still I felt like a massive failure. But then something kind of amazing happened, believe it or not, in Alabama. Our neighbor's cat, this fat orange tabby that had been eyeing me suspiciously from across the street since we moved in, came over jumped up on the porch and just plopped down in my lap, just out of the blue. And this cat had shown me nothing but disdain the entire time we lived there before this very moment. I started petting him, and he didn't hiss. He actually started purring. And I found myself talking to this cat, not Garfield, but similar, like his doppelganger, about my job situation. What am I gonna do, cat? Because I didn't know his name. We just got here, and now I'm unemployed again. And this cat just looks up at me with these bored eyes, like, yeah. That's a rough one, buddy. Not just keep petting me. And I started laughing at that moment, just snorting, because here I am having an existential crisis, and this cat couldn't care less. Couldn't care less. All he wanted was some attention. Well, all he wanted was some attention. Now, it definitely puts things in perspective somehow. Now, next day comes, and I hit it hard. Start throwing in job application after job application after job application. And, a short time after that, I had an interview with Universal Music Group, and a month later, I was employed again, working remotely with better pay, thank God, better hours, thank God, and the best benefits I've ever had in my entire 45-year living on this rock. That job has not only been a lifeline for us in more ways than we can count, allowing us to move to a safer, more hospitable area, providing stability through challenging times, but from a physical aspect, it has saved my life and it's saved my wife's life as well because of surgeries we've had to have to fix things and barely having to pay anything out of pocket compared to the actual cost. Now, looking back, getting fired from WVTM and Hearst Television to me was one of the best things that could have happened, believe it or not. But at the time, and I'm sure you guys can agree with this, I wasn't able to see that when I was in the middle of it. I wasn't able to see the benefit that it was actually going to provide while I was dealing with it. All I could see was the failure, which had happened way more times than I wanted it to, the setback, and the trauma of having my career derailed again. I just again and again and again. Um, but that's another key aspect of resilience, guys. Sometimes you can only recognize it in retrospect, in the rear view. In the moment, you're just trying to survive. You're in fight or flight mode, and you're doing everything you can to not crumble and let your entire life and everybody's who's in your sphere's lives go to crap. It's only later afterwards that you can look back and see how you grew, how you adapted, and how you bounced back. Now, I've got one more story that I want to share with you guys, and it's about my relationship with my father. The quintessential American dream growing up with the father. Yeah. As I mentioned many times before, we've never had the best relationship. He grew up in boys' homes, never really had a model for how to be a father, didn't have the blueprint, and I suffered as a result. It's, as I got older, our relationship to deteriorated to the point where we barely spoke, and to this day, that hasn't gotten any better, unfortunately. Now, when my son was born in 2020, I was terrified. Even before, like when we knew we were pregnant and it actually was sticking, and it was not another unfortunate miscarriage loss. Um, I was terrified of repeating that pattern. I said to myself over and over through my adult years, when I have a family, I'm not going to raise my child the way I was raised. That song, Father of Mine, if you've ever listened to it by Everclear, speaks to me immensely. I'm never going to be the man or the man that he was to me, um, to my child. Um, and yeah, I swore up and down, even though I was terrified, I was going to break the cycle. I was not going to let it continue. I was not going to allow my son to be neglected because of the way I was neglected. I found myself getting frustrated when my son would cry. Unfortunately, at times it does still affect me now, even 5 years later, but obviously it's gotten way less than it was when he was first born. Um, I felt that at the time, I felt that same impatience my dad had shown me, where, hey, why are you crying? You shouldn't be crying. Stop crying. Da da da. I was just shutting it down as quick as possible. And at the time, it scared me a lot. The idea that I might be slowly becoming the father that I had resented, the father I swore I was never going to be. And there was this moment about my son was around 6 months old, I want to say. He was crying inconsolably, and nothing I did seemed to help. I felt this rage building inside of me, this frustration that felt way too familiar. And I had to put him down in his crib, and I had to walk away for a minute. I went into the bathroom, looked at myself in the mirror, and I said out loud, "You are not your father. You are not that man." I repeated it like a mantra. You are not your father. You are not your father. And when I went back to my son, I picked him up with that new patience, a newfound sense of focus. I held him close, rocked him, sang to him off key because I can't sing a tune to carry a tune to save my life. My wife is the beautiful singer that loves to sing in Frosty the Snowman, ABC's Twinkle Twinkle, helps him pass out every single night. And eventually, back then, he calmed down. And thankfully, luckily, we both did. That was a massive turning point for me at the time. I realized, that why I couldn't change my past or my relationship with my dad, no matter what, I could and would change the future. I could be the father my son needed, you know? I could even if it meant unlearning some deeply integrated patterns inside my genes. And you know what's funny? My son is now at an age where he thinks I'm the coolest person on the planet. We hear all the time, "I love you, Dada. I love you, Mama. You guys are you're the best Dada. You're the best Mama." We hear it all the time, and we give it right back to him. We reciprocate it because our home, our little bubble is filled with love, support, and motivation. Um, he said he wants to be just like me. Like I've gotten him into wrestling, watching wrestling, and we watch PLEs, which in the old school term was called pay-per-views. Now they're premium live events. We watched WrestleMania, and he was whooping and hollering. I got him his own title belt, matches mine. We were talking about which ones were good people, which ones were bad people. We were talking about moves, and the fact that he wants to be like me, that he emulates me, it's flattering, but it's also terrifying. But it's also, in a weird way, it's also healing in a way that I never, ever, ever expected. Through his eyes, I'm getting to experience the kind of father-son relationship I always wanted to have. So he's providing me that opportunity that I never thought I would have. And that's also another example of resilience because it takes the broken patterns from your past and it reshapes them into something better for the future. So far this episode, we've covered trauma, we've covered resilience, and we've covered bouncing back and stories of bouncing back. Next segment we're going to be diving into here momentarily after the quick little ad break coming up is going to be humor as a coping mechanism. Humor is something that I love, humor is something that I excel at, and humor is something that is also sometimes a detriment to me. So we're going to dive into that with humor being a coping mechanism in just a moment here after a quick ad break. Again, you're listening to the Smorgasbord with John Knopick. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we'll be right back. You're listening to the Smorgasbord with John Knopick. Thanks for bringing up a plate and serving yourself a heaping helping. You can catch me on all social medias at smorgasbordjk or by email john@knopickventures.com. Grab your fork and knife. It's time to dive back in. All right, guys, welcome back to the Smorgasbord. I am John Knopick again. Thank you guys so much for grabbing a heaping helping and diving in with me. Now, we are talking this week about trauma, resilience, and finding your laugh when life gets messy. So, let's dive into one of my all-time favorite coping mechanisms, something that I'm very well versed in, something that I excel in, humor. Now, I'm not talking about toxic positivity here, that good vibes only nonsense that makes you feel like, you can't express negative emotions. No, 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 no. I'm talking about finding the absurdity in difficult situations and using laughter as a release valve. You know, believe it or not, there's actually scientific evidence, I do my research, that humor helps us cope with stress and trauma. When we laugh, our bodies release what's called endorphins, those feel good chemicals that act as natural painkillers. Laughter also reduces the level of stress hormones in our bodies and increases the immune cells, improving our resistance to disease. It basically builds up the foundation and the armor to protect us from disease and other things trying to attack us. But beyond the physical benefits, humor also gives us psychological, again, psychology, tying it in, guys. A water bottle made noise. Sorry about that. Humor gives us psychological distance from our problems. It helps us to see our situations from different perspectives, which can make them, thankfully, feel more manageable. Because if you're um, seeing different viewpoints and things, it can break things down and make it easier to handle. And I myself, I've always used humor as a shield. Um, Again, as I said, even when there's the darkest situations going on, I'm always trying to find ways to lighten the mood and to get people focused on things other than the negative stuff going on. Um, I used it as a shield. I always have. Yeah, a way to, kind of deflect things, as I said, when things get way too heavy. It's not always healthy though, guys. Sometimes you just are forced and have to sit with those difficult emotions rather than just joke them away. Um, and I've had to unfortunately deal with deal with it in that kind of a way on more than one occasion. But there is a difference between using humor to avoid your feelings and using it to process them. For example, going to dive right back into 2020 again because this provides a treasure trove of ammunition and ingredients for this particular episode. 2020, right after my mom passed, my sisters were cleaning out their house, and this was another thing that it kind of created a rift in the family because when my wife's grandparents both passed away, their house essentially all of the items in it they had all of the family members come together and basically go through all the memories and treasures and things and be like, who wants this? Who wants that? Da, 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 da. Not the way my family handled it. When my mom passed, and then my father quickly moved on to another person and moved out of the house that he said he was going to die in. This is the last house I'm ever going to live in. Yeah, and no. Um, my sisters didn't do that. They decided to go through all of the stuff themselves, and I got the scraps. Here's what's left. What would you like? Again, so you kind of see how we absolutely struggled from a family dynamic. Um, and the funny part was that when I was going through the scraps, I found this drawer full of these random single socks. Like they were orphaned socks. They didn't have a match to speak of. Dozens of them. And I started making up these elaborate stories about what happened to their partners. I'm good at improv. I got it right off the top of my head. This one ran off with a pantyhose from the next drawer over, or this one joined a sock cult and is living in a commune in Oregon. And I just was riffing. I mean, it got me laughing so hard that I had tears coming down my face. Um, or maybe it was the fact that I was crying so hard because of what I was having to go through that I started laughing, was one of the two. Either way, it was this moment of connection and release in the middle of grief. It was a way to step away from what the underlying meaning of having to be there and just allowed me to just be relaxed. Now, I wasn't avoiding the pain. I was just finding a way through it together, with my wife and son who were there with me. Um, Another example that I have, going back to Alabama once again, um, when I got fired, I'm not going to say laid off, fired, no uncertain terms is what it was. I came home well, I should say, once I got fired over the phone, uh, the first thing that came out of my mouth when my wife was had this like massive freak out and she was starting to hyperventilate in the Publix parking lot, and I didn't want to have to call EMS. I looked at her straight in the face and I said, "Good news! I don't have to worry about the commute anymore up to Birmingham every day." She became stone faced. I thought she was gonna bludgeon me to death with the salami she had in her hand, but then she just started laughing, like dead on. Her laughs, when she really gets into a laughing fit, she gets silent, but you can still hear the laughing coming out. And that's exactly the level it went to. It was gallows humor, 100%, for sure. But it helped us both, all of us, because my son was there too, of course, face that situation without completely falling apart and just breaking down and letting everything crumble. And believe it or not, dark humor can be especially powerful, especially during those most traumatic of times. There's a reason that emergency room doctors and nurses often have the darkest sense of humor. They're dealing with life and death situations every single day. That is their job. That is what they signed up for. And humor of that nature just helps them process and continue functioning. And of course, everybody's going to say it, and I agree with you guys. There is a time and a place for that kind of humor. I get it. It works when you're joking about your own trauma, or when you're with the people who share your experiences and understand the context of those jokes. It doesn't work, however, when you're making light of someone else's pain or using humor to minimize their experience. You never want to do that. Never minimize someone else's pain and battles that they're dealing with. Not a good look, and would not end well. Um, I found that some of my closest friendships through my years have been forged through shared dark humor, like my colleague Jerry, at Doc Magic. There's something incredibly weirdly bonding about being able to laugh with someone about the things that have hurt you the most. It creates this sense of we're all in this together, if you know High School Musical. That really ends up being quite powerful. Um, my wife and I, we have this running joke about the how the universe seems to time major life events to maximize trauma. Like it knows the perfect time to do it, to maximize the damage. Like how my mom passed right before meeting our son. How her grandfather died the day before we announced we were expecting. We'll say things like, well, who's going to die when we buy a house? We don't like putting things like that out into the universe. So we had to kind of rewind the clock on that one and rewind. Be like, eh. It does sound horrible, believe it or not, out of context, but for us, it's our way of acknowledging the pattern of loss that we have experienced without letting it crush us. And you know what, guys? Sometimes the only appropriate response to life's absurdity is inappropriate laughter, believe it or not. Because when you're standing in the middle of the wreckage of what's left of your plans, sometimes, All you can do is throw your head back and laugh at the insane cosmic joke of it all. If you're going through something difficult right now, I'm giving you permission, and you need to give yourself permission to find that humor in it when you can. It doesn't mean that you're not taking the situation seriously, okay? It means you're finding moments of relief in the midst of your particular struggle or situation. And those moments of relief right there, those moments might be what gets you guys through to the other side. Now, we've gone through all of the resilience and coping mechanisms and trauma and things like that. Next segment on the Smorgasbord's menu is going to be some practical tools on how to actually build that resilience. We're going to take another quick little ad break. We'll be right back here on the Smorgasbord with John Knopick. Thank you guys so much for tuning in wherever you might be, and we'll be back here in just a moment. Stick around. You're listening to the Smorgasbord with John Knopick. Thanks for bringing up a plate and serving yourself a heaping helping. You can catch me on all social medias at smorgasbordjk or by email john@canoppicventures.com. Grab your fork and knife. It's time to dive back in. All right, guys, welcome back to the Smorgasbord with John Knopick. Thank you guys so much again for tuning in. Whether you're checking this out via video on YouTube or any of your podcast feeds, I greatly appreciate it. Again, you can reach out to me on all social media platforms at smorgasbordjk or by email john@canoppicventures.com. Now, next segment here inside the Smorgasbord, let's talk about some practical tools, as it were, for building the resilience that we were just discussing. Because while some people seem naturally just more resilient than others, the good news is that resilience is still a skill that you can develop with practice. So anybody can develop it. First up is going to be building and maintaining those very strong necessary social connections. Gotta have those. This is probably, I'm going to say, the most important factor in resilience. Humans, as we know, are social creatures. And as social media continues to grow, we become even bigger ones. And we're not meant to go through difficult times alone. We're just not built that way. When my wife and I moved up here to Colombia, we were coming from a place where we felt isolated and unsafe. One of the first things we did was connect with other parents at the park. As I said, my wife and son made very fast friends with people that they now call their crew and continue to grow that out as time goes along. We also, met people at the library, Spring Hill Library, um, essentially anywhere our son was making friends. And of course, especially for my wife, it felt very, very awkward at first. Making friends as an adult is like to some, I'm not like this because I'm not a drinker, but I've been told making friends as an adult is like dating without the alcohol. Uh, again, I can't speak to it because I'm not an alcoholic drinker. But those connections we forged with those people at the park and the library and stuff, they have become a very strong lifeline, especially to my wife and son. And having people you can call when you're struggling, people who will show up for you without judgment, is invaluable. No other way to explain it. It's just invaluable. And absolutely, it's a two-way street. It goes both ways. Being there for others when they're going through tough times only helps to strengthen those bonds. And in addition to that, it gives you a huge sense of purpose, which is a massive benefit. Now, the next tool for you guys is practicing mindfulness and self-compassion. These are also very critical things. Mindfulness is about staying present and positive in the moment, rather than getting caught up in regrets about the past or worries about the future. It's about observing your thoughts and feelings without judgment. And again, I'm not going to pretend that I'm some meditation guru or anything like that. Sitting still for more than 5 minutes is a challenge for me. As you know, if you listen to my previous episodes, I was diagnosed with ADHD as a kid growing up, and I can't stay stagnant for an extended period of time without my legs moving, my hands moving. I have to be doing something. But even, I've found that even small moments of mindfulness within your comfort zones can make a big, big difference. Taking a few deep breaths when I feel overwhelmed or when I feel myself ramping up when my son's acting out or something's going on that's triggering my anxiety. Paying attention to the feeling of my feet on the ground when that anxiety starts to spiral. I feel myself tapping my feet more or wringing my hand or, doing like I do like this thing where I put my finger, I rub the back of my finger up against my lips. My wife says that do that also when I'm really deep in thought too. It's a subconscious thing. I don't know where it started. But these simple practices, they help bring me back to the present moment and recalibrate myself to the current situation. And again, as I said, equally as important as mindfulness and practicing mindfulness is self compassion. It's about treating yourself with that same kindness and that same understanding that you would offer to a good friend. And we're often our own harshest critics, especially when we're going through difficult and traumatic times and experiences. I remember on more than one occasion beating myself up after being fired or having my job be eliminated, um, or anything like that from a career perspective. My brain was just going into this mode of bashing me, going, "You should have seen it coming. You should have been more careful. You failed your family again." The negative self-talk ate me up to no end. But then, when it was getting really out of control, I tried to imagine what I would say to a friend who is going through the same situation that I was. Would I berate them for getting fired or laid off? Of course not. I remind them of their strengths, their past successes, their ability to overcome challenges. I tell them that this setback does not define them, and it could end up being a blessing in disguise as time goes on, as long as they maintain that focus and used it as fuel to drive them further and bounce back. Learning to talk to yourself with that same compassion, I've come to find is an absolute game changer. It doesn't mean that you're not taking responsibility for your actions or that you're not learning from your mistakes. It means that you do so with kindness rather than with cruelty. You find positive motivation and feedback rather than self-criticism and hate speech as a word as another word to say. You know, um, Another key tool in addition to all of the ones I've mentioned, is finding meaning in adversity. You've got to find that. It doesn't mean that you have to be grateful for those traumatic experiences or believe that, as my sister likes to say, for some reason, everything happens for a reason. He's got plans for all of us. Huh. It means looking for ways to grow from your experiences, to use them, as I said, as catalysts and motivation and fuel for a positive change. After my mom passed, I became much more intentional about creating those memories with my son. We take pictures every day. We take video clips every day. We tell more stories. We try to, we look back at memories of photos and videos we've already taken over the years from each other and things like that. I don't want to miss a moment. Neither does my wife, because we know how precious and fleeting time can truly be. That's the meaning that I've created from my loss. And similarly, my experiences with that job instability and all those failures have led me to develop multiple skills and income streams, like what I'm trying to build here with this podcast, my wife's publishing and book dreams, amongst other things. I'm more adaptable now, more resourceful, and more prepared for whatever comes next. It doesn't mean that I'm glad I got laid off multiple times. Anybody who says that they're glad that that happened is cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs and might need to see someone. But it does mean that I've found value in those experiences. And in that same vein, another tool that for your arsenal, your quiver, whatever you want to utilize as your terminology, is maintaining perspective and a sense of hope. Always look on the bright side of life. Monty Python, Holy Grail, love that love that movie, especially when they're all being ready to be crucified, but they're all on the cross, going always look on the bright side of life, and they're whistling along. It's comedy at its finest, especially back in those days. Resilient people, they're able to see beyond their current circumstances. They believe that things will get better, not could get better. They will get better. That their actions will make that difference, and that there is always going to be a light at the end of the tunnel. This can be, unfortunately, and especially challenging, though, when you're in the thick of trauma. It's hard to see past the pain when you're consumed by it. But even small glimmers of hope can sustain you through the darkest times. When we were living over in Gunshot Alley, Little Memphis, and feeling unsafe, what actually kept us going was the hope of finding a better place for our family, getting to move over here to this area of Tennessee, Spring Hill, Columbia, Murfreesboro. We researched safer neighborhoods over here, saved money for a move, and kept our eyes on that goal. The eyes were always on the prize. No matter what was going on around us, whatever was coming at us, we had that golden path that we were focused on. And eventually, as you can see, we made it happen. That hope gave us the strength to endure a difficult situation while we worked to change it. And finally, this brings us back to where we started with this segment, maintaining a sense of humor, finding moments of levity even in the dark times, laughing at the absurdity that is life, not taking yourself too seriously. And as I say at the end of my show every week, ladies and gentlemen, take my advice, pull down your pants and slide on the ice. That's exactly what it means. Laugh at the absurdity of life. Don't take yourself too seriously. Enjoy, embrace the humor in the chaos. Humor reminds us that no matter how bad things get, there's still joy to be found. There's still connection. There's still humanity and humility. And sometimes a good laugh is exactly what you're going to need, exactly what the doctor ordered to keep you going. So, those are your practical tools for building resilience: making strong social connections, mindfulness and self compassion, finding meaning in adversity, maintaining perspective and hope, and keeping your sense of humor. None of these will make trauma disappear, but they can help you navigate it with more grace and strength. We've got one more heaping helping in a segment here in this week's smorgasbord, and that's going to be our listener stories and some closing thoughts from yours truly. So, one more little ad break here. Stick around. Thank you guys so much again for tuning in here. This is the Smorgasbord. I'm John Knopick. Thank you guys for tuning in wherever you might be, and we'll be back in just a moment. Stick around. You're listening to the Smorgasbord with John Knopick. Thanks for bringing up a plate and serving yourself a heaping helping. You can catch me on all social medias at smorgasbordjk or by email john@canopicventures.com. Grab your fork and knife. It's time to dive back in. All right. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to the Smorgasbord. I am John Knopick. And appreciate you guys again, as I said, whether you're tuning in via YouTube, watching this video, or you're tuning in on wherever you get your podcast streams. We greatly appreciate it. You can find me on all social media at smorgasbordjk or email john@canopicventures.com. And now it's time for the final segment and my favorite part of every single episode, sharing your stories. Again, I reached out to social media for you guys, asking for your experiences with trauma and resilience. And thankfully, you guys delivered some very, very powerful stuff. First up, we have a message from Lisa over in Portland, Oregon. She writes, John, I lost my house in a wildfire 3 years ago. I am so sorry for your loss. I lived in California. I was close to some wildfires. But yeah, I understand exactly what you're going. Sorry about that, guys. Had a little technical difficulty there really quick. But Lisa, Portland, Oregon, writing that she lost her house in a wildfire 3 years ago. And Lisa, I'm so sorry to hear that. Again, as I said, I lived in California, and I was very close to wildfires. We didn't have any that actually happened to us, but we actually had like so close we had ash falling on our car. So, again, I can't begin to completely, um, I can't begin to completely, speak to what you're going through, but I understand if you're seeing everything that's happened. She says everything is gone. Photos, heirlooms, my kids' baby books. I thought I'd never recover, but the strangest thing happened. She says, as we were sifting through the ashes, my 8-year-old found the charred remains of this ugly ceramic frog I'd always hated, a gift from my mother-in-law. Somehow it survived when everything else burned. My kid holds it up and says, "Look, Mom, even fire doesn't want this thing." Oh, kid, you got the humor down. Nicely done. We laughed until we cried. That frog now sits on our mantle in our new house as a reminder that even in our darkest moments, there's something to laugh about. And yes, my mother-in-law thinks we display it because we love it so much. Nice touch. Lisa, that is absolutely perfect. You've hit the nail on the head. That ugly ceramic frog is the perfect symbol of resilience, not because it survived, but because you found a way to transform it from something you hated into something meaningful. And the fact that it was humor that bridged that gap, chef's kiss. Thank you for the story there, Lisa. Greatly appreciated. Next up, we have a message from Marcus in Chicago, one of my favorite towns of all time. Marcus says, after my divorce, I fell into a deep depression. Couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, could barely get out of bed. My brother, who was worried about me, signed me up for an improv comedy class. Nice brother. Without telling me. Oh, well, there you go. Nice little gift that keeps on giving. Good job. Just showed up at my apartment and said, "We're going out." I was furious. Last thing I wanted to do was pretend to be a tree or whatever in front of strangers. But something happened during that class. I laughed for the first time in months. Oh, I remember the first time I laughed after my mom passed. It felt so good, like a weight was being lifted off my shoulders. So I get you there. I went back the next week and the next. 3 years later, I'm performing regularly with an improv troupe. Nice. And met some of my best friends through comedy. That best way to make a crew right there is through something so incredibly giving as comedy. I'm not saying improv cured my depression. I also got therapy and medication. Sometimes you have to go that route. It's the nature of the beast. But it gave me a lifeline when I was drowning. Marcus, thank you so much for sharing that, dude. What a powerful, that is a very powerful reminder to everyone of how important it is to have people who will drag you out of your darkness, even when you're fighting them every step of the way, and how finding your laugh can be a path back to yourself. And last but not least, we have a message from Tanya, just down the road from us, actually, here in Nashville. Tanya writes, I grew up in a household with addiction and abuse. My wife actually grew up in a household with that, so she can speak to this. By all accounts, I should be a statistic, but I had this teacher in fifth grade who saw something in me. She gave me the books, stayed after school to help me with homework, even came to my band concerts when my parents couldn't be bothered. She taught me that I wasn't defined by what happened to me, but by how I responded. Makes sense. Nice teacher. I'm now a teacher myself, trying to be that person for other kids who need someone in their corner. Nice. Way to pay it forward. That's exceptional. The cycle stops with me. I've said that to myself so many times when it came to raising my son, so I feel you there. Tanya, that story definitely got me right in the gut. It is a very beautiful, powerful reminder of how one person can change the trajectory of someone's life, like I'm doing with my son. And how resilience isn't just about bouncing back, it's about using your experiences to create positive change for others. Thank you, thank you, thank you for breaking that cycle and being a positive light for the next generation. Now, these three stories here, they all illustrate something important about resilience. It often depends on the connection, whether it's finding that humor with your family in the aftermath of disaster, being dragged to an improv class by a brother who won't give up on you, or having a teacher who believes in you when no one else does. We heal in our relationships, by way of our relationships with others. Now, as we wrap up today's episode, I want to leave you guys with one parting thought. little food for thought here on the smorgasbord, as it were. Trauma is part of the human experience. None of us get through life unscathed. No. But resilience is also part of the human experience. We have an incredible capacity to endure, to adapt, to grow, and yes, to laugh, even in our darkest moments. Whether you're going through something right now, know that you're not alone. No matter what it is, you're not alone. You've always got someone there, and always remember that it won't always feel as heavy as it might feel right now. And also know that there are tools and resources and people who can help you find your way through. And remember, sometimes the most resilient thing that you can do is laugh when you feel like crying. Reach out when you want to isolate. And keep moving forward even when you can only take the smallest of steps. Thank you guys so much for joining me on this heaping helping of the Smorgasbord with John Knopick. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe. Give me a follow on all social media platforms, on all your podcast feeds. Leave me a review, give me some feedback, and share the show with someone who might need it, someone who might benefit from this little session that I've given you guys. Again, you can find me on all social media platforms at smorgasbordjk, or shoot me an email at john@canopic.ventures.com. Next week, guys, topic you've all been waiting to hear from, or hear about, I should say, and we're going to be diving head first into it. We're diving into the wild world of conspiracy theories, from the ones that turned out to be true, more and more nowadays seems to be the case, to the ones that make you wonder, what in the world are people smoking? It's going to be a fun one. Don't miss it. It'll be again out every single Friday on all your podcast and YouTube feeds. This, of course, has been the Smorgasbord with John Knopick. I am John Knopick. And as always, like we love to close out our show every single time, ladies and gentlemen, take my advice. Pull down your pants and slide on the ice. I hope you guys have a great week. Find humor in the chaos. Stay safe. Much love to you all. And we'll see you guys next Friday for another helping of the Smorgasbord. See ya.